And good morning, Utsoda. Utsoda, namaste, and welcome to HinduLounge. Um, Utsoda, this is our episode number 73. And for people who are just joining us, this is HinduLounge. HinduLounge is brought to you by Hindu Pact. And Hindu Pact is the policy research and advocacy initiative of World Hindu Council of America, or WHPA. We come live every Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern, and we talk about contemporary American Hindu issues. And today, uh, Utsada, it is a very special day because today we are going to talk about, it's well. First, let me backtrack a little bit. Uh, Today is the third day of Hindu Heritage Month, the first ever Hindu Heritage Month celebrated in North America and hopefully soon other parts of the world as well. And as part of Hindu Heritage Month, we had a great show just a couple of days ago with over 50 organizations participating, with a lot of speeches, a really good perspective on Hindu life, Hindu culture, Hindu dharma, Hindu philosophy. And also there were a lot of there were a lot of cultural items like music and dance and all the other cultural aspects of Hindu life. And Utsada, this is what we did after at the end of that is we announced that every organization is going to play a role in doing their own programs their own way. And so we started with Hindu. We said, well, look, what is Hindu Lounge going to do? And from Hindu Lounge perspective, we decided that we are going to today, as part of the Hindu Heritage Month, focus on the Hindu heritage in Afghanistan and how Hindu heritage in Afghanistan is under attack. Utsoda, I have some preparatory slides, but I would like to turn it over to you first to welcome our guests who join us every single week at 11 o'clock Eastern on our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter channels. So, Utsoda, welcome.
Thank you, Ajay Bhai, and thanks for that generous welcome. And good morning, everybody. We have this is the third day of the Hindu Heritage Month, the first time ever in America when there has been a celebration of Hindu heritage, and October has been declared Hindu Heritage Month in more than 10 states and cities. So it's a very it's a good time. It's a festive season for all Hindus, and we decided to take upon a topic that is not discussed at all in the mainstream media in the last couple of months as things rapidly deteriorated in Afghanistan. And the reason we decided to take upon this topic is because in Afghanistan right now, there is a new government, if I can call it one, that has a very disturbing track record in the 1990s. As you all know, in the 1990s, the Taliban, during its first stint in power, was and is considered by most educated experts one of the most brutal regimes to have taken control in the modern times. And it destroyed a tremendous amount of historical heritage as well as real lives in Afghanistan in those 4 or 5 years that they had controlled the country. So now as the Taliban comes back to power, it is very important to figure out how we can ensure that the history of Afghanistan, which goes back to the Bronze Age, 6,000 plus 7,000 years of recorded history, much more is not recorded, is protected. Because as I don't know if our listeners know this, but 80% of Afghanistan's history is Hindu and associated with it Buddhist as well. So 80% of what is Afghanistan's heritage is directly connected to our personal heritage. So all the 1.3 billion Hindus around the world owe it to their ancestors, to their civilization, to their people, and to the people of Afghanistan in the world to work towards protecting it. So our show today is a call to action for that particular effort. And I would also like to guide everybody to our Twitter account on Twitter, Hindu Pact account on Twitter. It's at Hindu Pact, where we have a Twitter thread going on, calling on lawmakers, calling on the State Department, primarily the State Department and the White House, to come up with a game plan, come up with a strategy, work with us. We have put together a small report so far, but we have much more content to share with them, so that we can be partners in this endeavor of protecting our heritage. And no better time than now, which is Hindu Heritage Month, that is October 2021. So Ajay bhai,
let me build up to that a little bit. Let me lay out some of the history, if you don't mind. So this is the this is a news item that came a few years ago, and you can look at this and look at the title. It says the Afghan artifacts that survived destruction. Now, look what qualifies for survived. Okay, these are the pieces of fragments of Hindu murtis and Buddhist murtis, and some of them are really small particle-sized murtis, and they now classify them as survived. Look at the amount of destruction. This is the statue of Buddha at Mes Ayank in Afghanistan, and it has been beheaded and it has been disfigured, and this counts for a survival of a Buddhist artifact. And so that this is the huge, a head, a disfigured head of a huge Durga Mata statue in Afghanistan. And so that I'm getting some echo at your side, maybe background noise. I'm not sure. You may want to go mute.
It's my daughter talking. My apologies.
Okay. All right. So maybe you want to go mute for just a little bit. So that this qualifies as survival. At one time, a culture that was replete of Hindu and Buddhist artifacts, and now look, this is a disfigured head of Durga Mata as we get ready to celebrate the Navratri, right? And this is a quote that I got. This is after the Taliban takeover. I'm going to read this because this is so telling. According to Rahimi, this is the person who is one of the curators of the Afghan museum, a Kabul museum in Afghanistan. He said that they thought that the communist government, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in late 70s and early 80s, and they said that maybe the communist-backed government will be they convinced the museum curators, convinced the communist-backed government to hide 2/3 of the museum collection in bank vaults and storage spaces inside the Ministry of Information and Culture in central Kabul to protect it from the Mujahideen attacks. Remember, the Mujahideens at the time, who are back in power now, were continuously attacking the Kabul and the Kabul Museum and Kabul Palace and all of that. Then, as various Mujahideens groups fought over Kabul between 1992 and 96, much of the museum was reduced to rubble and left without electricity or running water. But during a brief lull in the fighting, the museum staff, many of whom had been unpaid as civil war raged, returned to the closed down building in 1994 with kerosene lamps to fill some 500 trucks, crates, and boxes with thousands of artifacts and securely relocated them to Kabul Hotel for safekeeping. And look what happened after that. In February 2001, the Taliban officials demanded to enter the museum's vaults and began smashing anything in human or animal form. Remember, this is Afghanistan's own past cultural heritage, but they started smashing it, believing that it was blasphemous.
Ajay bhai, it's not Afghanistan's cultural heritage, it's Afghanistan's religious and civilizational heritage. Culture is a two-generation thing. This goes back 7,000 years. If there is anything that is not cultural about this, it's this. So
I
I just
agree.
wanted
It
to
is like
correct you
religious.
because
It is
it's one
like
of my pet
religious
peeves,
heritage.
and we Hindus are very hesitant to use the word religious and civilizational because we don't grow up in India
So
using the word
for
religion.
us, it's for us. It comes together. Hindu Sanskriti and Hindu Dharma, they go together, and that's why when we translate to English, we sometimes use the word. But in reality, I mean, Sanskriti and Dharma are inseparable. When we talk about Hindu Dharma. So then he says that over a period of a few weeks, the Taliban regularly came to the museum and smashed the many historical statues we had on display and in the storerooms, including many Buddhist statues they deemed un-Islamic. Recalled a former museum staff member who identified himself as Muhammad Asif. Now, so that after that, when the U.S. Took over Afghanistan and tried to bring some sense of normality and bring back the ancient Afghan some of the ancient artifacts back. There was an exhibit held in Calcutta, and you can see that they described. I'm sorry, this is in US. The relics seized from smugglers were returned to Afghanistan, and this is the Afghan ambassador to US, showing the Afghan artifacts, some of them that are being returned to the Kabul Museum. Now, after that, um, you know, all of a sudden, in a brief span of less than 2 months, Taliban recently took over Afghanistan. And this is a quote from National Geographic from Noor Agha Noori, who heads the Afghanistan's Institute of Archaeology in Kabul, saying that, look, we never expected this to happen so soon. And now all the artifacts are now under even more threat than they were in past. And so this is what was destroyed and what this is what is left, and now even this is under renewed threat. And with that, Utsoda, I turn it over to you because you've done extensive research. I just wanted to lay out a little bit of history as to how we got here, and now turn it over to you for further elaboration, because you've done quite a bit of research on the Afghan artifacts and what state they are in now and what we need to do next. So over to you, Soda.
So I would first like to thank Manikanta Kuchodisetti, who is a friend of ours and a very, very sharp, knowledgeable member of our Hindu community, who helped put together this content and has worked very hard to collect information. We are quite a few of us are aware of what is there, and many of what I'm going to be showing now. But it is important that we compile it together, and Manikanta played a key role in doing that. And so I want to thank him. He's not with us on this show today, but I really wanted to go on record thanking him for this effort. And Ajay, if you can make this the PowerPoint slide a little bigger.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And let me remove the sidebar as much as possible.
Yeah.
And
So
let me make it bigger.
thank you so much. This is perfect, Ajay. So what has happened, Ajay, is that this is a unique situation that we are facing, because over the last month or so, there was so much frenzy in terms of dealing with the human lives and the human cost of what Taliban is perpetrating, Taliban 2.0 is perpetrating, that people lost track of what is at stake in the long term. And as most of our people, community members, in general Americans, are aware that Taliban destroyed the Bamiyan Buddhas, and that's probably the most famous act of desecration and destruction that Taliban did in 2000, the year 2000, 20 years ago. If you can go to the next slide, Ajay bhai. I can come back to this slide after that. Yeah. So what most people are not aware of, and you pointed to that in the beginning of the presentation today, Ajay bhai, is that the Taliban also destroyed about 55,000 manuscripts at the Puli Khumri Public Library. 55,000. And Hindu Americans and Hindus around the world probably can connect it to something else that happened to them many, many times in history. Most famous of them being the Nalanda University. So this is a repeat of what happened in Nalanda. This is a repeat of what happened in Takshashila. This is a repeat of what happened in Vikramshila, where millions of manuscripts were destroyed forever by Islamists. And most Hindus probably know about it. They probably haven't known details about it. But this was happening 20 years ago in Afghanistan. And the Taliban destroyed the Puli Khumri Public Library with 55,000 manuscripts. They destroyed about 70% of the 100,000 objects that were in the collection at the Afghan National Museum in Kabul. And this was so, it was so commonplace, and the Taliban was going about doing it in such an aggressive manner that people were selling, both the Taliban supporters and the general average Islamist on the street in Afghanistan were selling artifacts to the people in the Western countries, and they were basically just using this to make money and fund the Taliban and other Islamic terror groups. And Pakistan played a key role in that, because what Pakistan was doing, Pakistan is not a rich country. It has limited resources, very limited resources, and it primarily survives on aid. So when Pakistan saw this as an opportunity to raise money for its terror activities, because that's part of its strategic footprint, Pakistan has to promote terrorism for it to achieve whatever objectives it has in foreign policy and geopolitics. Pakistan was using this to selling artifacts, the Hindu and Buddhist heritage of Afghanistan, to raise money for the Taliban and other Islamic terror groups. So this was what was happening 20 years ago.
And so let me ask you this question: isn't that the silver lining here? That at least, if for nothing else, because they were trying to raise the funds, some of the artifacts got saved.
That is actually true to some extent. That is actually true, because it's better that they were sold out. But the challenge comes to us now then, that how do we locate them and secure them and give them a place back in history? Because now it's lying in somebody's living room next to a bottle of scotch. And that's not where this.
Well, also, a lot of them got returned to Kabul Museum after Taliban were defeated, and
yes, they were returned, and a lot of them were also properly documented, and that's what is helping us as well in our, as you will see in the next half of our show, that we are actually trying to document many of these things. And that's why I asked everybody to go to our Twitter thread and see. We have started the process of documentation. We have about 10 tweets already documenting each of these elements. And then we are going to continue to do this over the next months. And all we are asking for is a partnership and a place at the seat at the table with the State Department and the White House. We can help them find these and relocate it in full historical honor and tradition. Because that's what American Hindu community, we are the civilization that built it. We are the civilization that takes pride in it. And that's why we are doing this effort. So that's the thing, Ajay bhai. And the comparison we can bring to this situation is the situation that happened in northern Syria, actually the entire Syria and northern Iraq, during the Islamic State regime that controlled the Iraq and Syria the size of Texas in between 2014 and 2020. So there also the same thing happened. There was a tremendous amount of Proto-Vedic heritage in Syria and Iraq, as well as Byzantine, Greek, and Roman heritage in those places, all pre-Islamic, and therefore very, very susceptible to targeted destruction by Muslims, Islamists. I should clarify myself. And they had the same. There were entire accounts on online accounts, on those Amazon and what's the other very commonly used program for selling stuff?
Even eBay.
eBay. My apologies. eBay. As you can see, I'm not much of a buyer on eBay myself. So eBay was very common place to get some of these relics during ISIS time, and ISIS was doing it openly. And that is something very similar to what the Pakistan government and Taliban did in early 2000s. I don't think there was an eBay, but they were doing the exact same
there
thing.
was eBay in early 2000s.
Okay. Again, my lack of knowledge on IT based, internet based marketing stuff.
We will give you some gift certificates to eBay so you can experience eBay firsthand.
Okay, I would be happy to do that, Ajay bhai. I've never used eBay to begin with. So, all right. So that's the background that we are starting with. So if you go to the next slide, you can see here in this slide some photographs of some of the deities that were destroyed and broken, and you can see they are literally in pieces. And to think that they survived 5,000, 6,000 years. So that's 70% of Afghanistan's, 80% of Afghanistan's known history, only to face a modern day plague called the Taliban and radical Islam, and face this kind of desecration and destruction in front of our eyes. So, we are the people who built this. We are seeing the destruction of it. It's on to us now as Hindus in America and around the world to save them. And that's why we are running this campaign. So if you go back 2 slides, Ajay bhai. So during this Hindu Heritage Month, we have started this campaign. We reached out to the State Department and Secretary Blinken, requesting him a place at the table so that we can work on this issue. And that if you are in different states across the country, you want to join this effort, you want to join the effort in locating many of these things, these heritages, please get in touch with us, and we will be happy to work with you. So the process that we are trying to do is...
Sorry,
no, you can go on that slide. That's the I was going to go to that next anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was going to explain what is it that we are planning to do. So first thing is the step that we have started in this Hindu Heritage Month, which is identifying the heritage sites and the objects. And that is a process in itself. Whether we get a seat at the table with the State Department and the White House, irrespective of that, we are going to do that out of our own respect for our civilization and our Hindu heritage. And we are going to put effort using open sources. We would be happy to have help from governments, but as Hindu Pact, we are requesting people to use their outreach and open source information to identify the heritage sites and the objects. That's the number one. The next step is we are putting together a team, and we are hoping that you could help in that to document this and put them in a proper documented form, because there are fragmented pieces of information in different museums and different parts of historical papers presented across the world, but there is no compilation of it. And so we are trying to do that compilation. That would be the next step for us. And then, as we are doing now, and we have been starting this since this is Hindu Heritage Month, we are going to do awareness programs and campaigns. We want to ensure that there is no more Bamiyan Buddhas and the destruction of Puli Khumri Public Library in this era, in this generation. We have to ensure that that is our responsibility to the rest of the world and our past. So that's the campaign we are going to launch, and we are going to run simultaneously. Now, in this effort, if you know celebrities, if you know people who have influence on social media, on the public platform, help us connect with them. Help us connect with them so that they can give their voice in this issue, on this issue. So we are going to do this effort. And it's very ironic that the current Prime Minister of Afghanistan, Hassan Akhund, he is the person who ordered the tanks and the dynamites that were used for the destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas. He was the one who ordered that destruction back 20 years ago. He is the person who is currently the interim Prime Minister of Afghanistan. So you can see the gravity of the situation and why we are doing this. This is not a joke. This is not something that we are doing just to make people aware. This is a real threat. The current Prime Minister of the Taliban 2.0 is the guy who ordered the destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas. So The fourth step that we are going to do is to collaborate with museums, institutions, and governments. And that can happen at any point of time. We are looking forward to work with anybody who is willing to work with us. We would like to work with the American State Department, as I noted so many times. But if there are governments out there who have access to this information, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, even Pakistan, I'm not sure Pakistan would really do anything to help us because it's the first country that destroys these things. But at least from our side, we are open to working with anybody.
So let me say one thing, and I don't know if you have seen this or not, and please take a look at this, because I just want to point out that there are other efforts underway. They were underway before the current Talibani takeover, and these efforts probably need to be strengthened. So I'm going to share this screen and take a look at this. And I don't know if you have seen this. So let me show this to you. It will just take me a second.
Please take your time.
Yeah. So that this is the you can see that this is at University of Chicago, and so the U.S. government funded a major effort
I
in
don't see it, Ajay bhai.
at
You have to
University
share
of
the screen.
Chicago.
I don't see it.
Pardon
You
me?
have to share the screen. I don't see
Oh,
the screen yet.
all right. Oh, it's turned off. Okay. All right. Just a second. So this is the effort at University of Chicago, well funded by the U.S. government before the current. But I wanted to hone in on this. This is the so they've actually done quite a bit of documentation of the Afghan artifact with the help of U.S. government funds. So you can see this is the they have done digital photo mosaic of the Surak Kotal inscription in the second century. This is really telling. A nation stays alive when its culture stays alive. This is the plaque in front of the National Museum of Afghanistan in Kabul, and now you actually, if you go down and read, there are quite a few resources that they have documented. So it's a very extensive documentation of what was destroyed. And let me make this a little bigger so everyone can read this. But you can see, so but the part that struck me the most here is that the cultural heritage of Afghanistan has been devastated by 4 decades of continuous war from Afghanistan, Soviet Union. We talked about it in the beginning, and it says that an estimated 70% of the objects were looted, while 90% of the object registration record, the one that you just mentioned, we'll try to document, 90% of the object registrational record itself is now destroyed. And since 2012, the Oriental Institute, this is the part of University of Chicago, and Oriental Institute has been carrying out 4 major projects of cultural heritage preservation in Afghanistan, supported by major grants from U.S. Department of State through American Embassy in Kabul. And now, so that I want to reiterate that we are doing this uh, so that to make sure that in the renewed political scenario in Afghanistan, with now Taliban taking over Afghanistan once again, this effort of State Department is renewed and redoubled, because the second Taliban regime is going, and now with the ISIS knocking at the door. You might have seen the news item today with the bombing in Kabul in a mosque. You see that between in now, if the fight you know intensifies between Taliban and ISIS, both of whom want to compete in destroying the Hindu heritage of Afghanistan and Buddhist heritage of Afghanistan. We need to make sure that the State Department redoubles the effort, and not just the U.S. State Department. We also want to make sure that the Indian government and the Nepalese government and the Japanese government, everyone who has a stake in the Hindu Buddhist heritage of Afghanistan, redouble their effort, because this was done since 2012, but now the environment is different, and you can see a lot of work has been done. There are so none of it is to say that no work has been done and we are starting from beginning here. We know that millions of dollars have been spent, but this is it is almost as if this is with Afghan takeover with Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, this has now become a renewed, a completely renewed effort from everyone's part is needed. It's a new game today.
So one of the reasons, Ajay Bhai, the work that they have done at University of Chicago is very valuable because it helps document some of the things that are at least not accessible outside the Afghanistan state libraries. So it's basically digitization that they have done. The reason why that is where the help ends is because with change of regime in Afghanistan and with the Taliban coming in, it has to start from zero, with the State Department taking a direct initiative to rescue and rehabilitate this. So the universities come afterwards, because right now whatever the universities have put together is accessible to us as information, and that's why we are using resources from everything that is available open source online, including this university's resources. But we have to directly work with the White House and the State Department, because the decision-making change and the chain of command that is involved in doing anything further in Afghanistan is not in the academia anymore. It's not in the hands of people who are doing research anymore. It's in the hands of people who make decisions. It's in the hands of people who control resources at the military level, at the State Department level, diplomatic level. And that's why we are directly trying to work or making an effort to do an outreach to the State Department and the White House, because from here onwards, it has to be these two entities, as well as the legislature, the lawmakers who can put pressure, these three entities that have to make the calls and that have to take the decisions. That's why we are trying to work directly with them, and that's
are we working with the other embassies and in US State Department, but how about the Japanese embassy and the Sri Lankan embassy and the Indian embassy and all of the other governments where that have stake in the Hindu Buddhist heritage of Afghanistan? Because I think that having US alone is not going to be sufficient, right? We need the entire world to come together and exert pressure. Now, this is the Taliban regime that is seeking legitimacy. This is the Taliban regime that wants to get recognition, and they cannot, if they continue their current ways or their past ways, then absolutely, every government in the world should be holding them accountable and making sure that not only these artifacts are preserved, but also extracting a promise from them that they would rebuild the Bamiyan Buddhist, statues, and they will rebuild some of the artifacts. Why not put that as a precondition for recognizing Taliban?
Absolutely, and that's why I said, Ajay bhai, in my conversation, in my monologue, that it is not just the US. We as Americans sitting in America are focusing on the US initiative, because America had the largest footprint in Afghanistan in the last 20 years. America also continues to have the largest amount of influence in Afghanistan, believe it or not, more than anybody else. Probably Pakistan has more influence than America at this point, but and probably China has more influence at this point. But other than that, America probably is in the top 3 list of countries that still has significant influence in Afghanistan. And that's why America has to lead the way. And we, being in America, can facilitate this in the most informed way. But other than that, if you see what I spoke during my monologue, that we are happy to reach Tajikistan, we are happy to reach to Uzbekistan, the two most longest borders with Afghanistan. We don't have access to Iran, so obviously we will not reach out to Iran. But there is a significant Zoroastrian history in Afghanistan as well, in the western part of Afghanistan. And even though Iran has given up its own Zoroastrian heritage and is now a pretty radicalized Islamic country, but there are probably elements within Iran who would like to preserve that. And
well, actually, the Zoroastrianism is on a rise in Iran. Actually, if you read all the news
reports, as well as in northern
there's
Iraq,
a renewal movement towards the Zoroastrian faith, and also the culture that prevailed during the Zoroastrian time.
Absolutely. So Iran has, they still celebrate Nowruz. They still celebrate Nowruz in Afghanistan as well. So there is a lot of remnant of the Proto-Vedic history of Iran that is still there, and I think that's why it is important that all these countries do come together in some form of effort, and not to forget Russia.
Let me ask you this. Oh, sorry. So let me ask you this question, and I want you to go over these slides, but I want to ask this question um, because we've been discussing this. I mean, China itself has a lot of Buddhist history, and China, if you go to China, China has preserved its history quite well. Even after the communist takeover and all that, you can still go to China. You can see the Buddhist statues. You can see it is part of Chinese cultural fabric. I mean, that Buddhist mandirs and statues and Buddhist philosophy in many ways is still preserved in China. One And now China has a lot of influence over Taliban. Shouldn't China be doing more in terms of influencing these Talibans to preserve the Buddhist and Hindu heritage? You can see Ganpati Murtis in China. Why would not China, which were help preserve the artifacts, the Buddhist and Hindu artifacts in Afghanistan? After all, Afghanistan was part of the Silk Trade route, and preserving the history of that is in interest of China, which is trying to do the modern Silk Road, right, with the with the Belt and Road Initiative and all the other things that they are doing. So why not Utsada? Why not China? Utsada, you're on mute.
So I would like you to go to slide number 13, Ajay bhai, if you can, and I will explain to you. There is a complicated relationship with China in this aspect, and I will also talk a little bit about China's own history. So what you see here is the Mesa. Remember, you showed me in the beginning when the slide you showed a statue of Buddha. It is this location, Mesa, where there is a Hindu. It's ancient world was not as cut and paste as it is in the Western world today, where Christianity, Islam, and Judaism have nothing. They hate at each other's tail. Hindu and Buddhist traditions were always working together. The kings used to be Hindus, and all dharmic traditions flourished under them, as well as in Afghanistan, and vice versa. During Kanishka's time, there are Hindus deities that go back to Kanishka's time. So Hindu and Buddhist, in today's modern terms of Western definition, didn't exist at all. So in Mesa, you see Hindu and Buddhist deities, and that is exactly where there is a tremendous amount of copper deposit. So I'm not so sure if China is really interested in promoting and preserving the historicity of these places, if they could extract copper out of them. So, and the Taliban needs money. As you said, the Taliban needs legitimacy. They are striving for that legitimacy, and they are not going to change their ideological and religious adherence, which is basically they have to destroy anything that involves any living form as ordered in the Islamic tradition. So they will use this opportunity to destroy Mesa, and China might be perfectly fine with it because China wants to take the copper out. So that's where, again, we come in and we have to play a role. We are okay to talk to the Chinese as well, but we have to put pressure on them and educate the world about the need for preserving these things. And I just wanted to make another point about Chinese history in terms of its religion and its preservation of their own history. I disagree with you, Ajay bhai, in terms of how you mentioned that China has preserved its history. Well, it actually hasn't. And during the Cultural Revolution, that the current Marxist regime, currently in China, you don't have a Chinese religious / civilizational entity in power. It is a Marxist regime that is in power, that has been in power since the 1960s, since Mao took control in the late 50s after the Civil War. So in the 60s, China destroyed about half of its own heritage, its own scriptures, its own manuscripts. So Chinese civilization, like the Hindu civilization, is one of the world's most ancient and the most powerful civilizations ever to have existed. If you look back at the economies of the world, for 80% of the world's recorded history, the Hindu economic system, which is basically, when I say Hindu, it's not just the geographical entity of India, but all the way from what is present day Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran to Indonesia and Malaysia. The Hindu civilization's economy and the Chinese civilization's economy were two of the largest economies in the world for more than 70 to 80% of their known recorded history of the world. That says a lot about what these heritages civilizations possessed. So Chinese had tremendous amount of civilizational antiquities, and it was invaluable. They destroyed it all during the Marxist revolution of 1960. They called it the Cultural Revolution. So it's not that they preserved it well. Only in the 1980s, when Marxism started dying out in other countries of the world, and when the Soviet Union collapsed, and all the other major Marxist societies were social, quote unquote socialist societies, communist societies, however you want to call them in the scale of Marxism, when they all started collapsing and becoming either democracies or absolute dictatorships with absolutely no power in anybody's hand other than the dictators, it was then that China decided to start going back to its civilizational roots. And only in the last 30, 40 years, China has tried to preserve and promote it, not because it cares about its own civilization. 3 generations of Chinese didn't. It is only because it sees that it has understood that civilizational power is the power that gives geopolitical power. And the Chinese understood that in the 80s. It's interesting that the Indians are beginning to understand that in the last 10 years.
So let me go back to what you just said. So I think you were right that during the Mao Zedong era in 1950s and immediate decade after that, there was a lot of destruction of the Chinese cultural heritage or Buddhist heritage at that time period. But if you come to 1970s onwards, which is now, Mao's destruction lasted for say 10 to 15 years, 20 years. But right after 70s, I mean, increasingly, the cultural revolution in China was discredited and it was not considered very cultural by the Chinese themselves. So I think from the 1970s, so a brief period of 20 years where they tried to destroy the
1980s, culture, 80s onwards.
I think when they started building connections with the US after the Nixon meeting with Mao, and gradually after that, when the Maoist was purged, and I think China is going back to some of those ways, but they have not. I think for good part of last almost 40 years, so let's say 20 years, they were destroying the Chinese Buddhist heritage, but last 40 years they have been trying to preserve it. So I think you're partially right when you say that Chinese were themselves destroying the heritage and all of that. I also agree with you that Chinese, the way the Chinese government works is they put a lot more credence on generating wealth and selling things and making money than they care about the cultural heritage. But I think there's substantial evidence that when it comes to its own cultural heritage, they have done quite a few things to preserve it. I would think that if we were to enroll the traditionally Buddhist countries in this effort, like China, like Japan, like Cambodia, like Vietnam and Thailand and Sri Lanka and all the other countries similar to that, we may get the international community to put pressure on the Taliban that is seeking legitimacy right now. And it is not just the US can do it, or not just India can do it. It has to be a broad-based pressure on the Talibani government. And right now, I know China has probably the most influence, so it's probably a good place to start. I do understand that the Afghan and Chinese economic interests converge when it comes to mining copper and mining other wealth, natural wealth of Afghanistan. But this is again one of those things where pressure can be put on China to help preserve these artifacts.
Absolutely. The pressure can be put on China. I'm not denying that fact. All I'm saying is that it is not as black and white in terms of Chinese interests and Chinese benefits out of it. I mean, one thing that China can really benefit from is that a general de-Islamization of that region and general acceptance of Chinese of pre-Islamic heritage will also help reduce Islamization of Xinjiang. So, there is no denying the fact that what you see as the Hindu and Buddhist heritage in Afghanistan continued through what is present day Tajikistan into what is present day Xinjiang. Xinjiang is completely Islamic right now, as a Turkic Islamic entity, and that's what gives rise to the Xinjiang movement of separatism from China, and that's where the Uyghur separatist movement comes from. But Uyghurs historically were all Hindus and Buddhists, and some of the biggest artifacts of Hindu heritage along the Silk Route uh, lies in what is present day Xinjiang, or what is the land of the
Yep.
Uyghurs. So, the earliest form of Hindu deities, whether it is Kuber, Diwali is coming, so a lot of people will be worshipping Kuber. The earliest representation of Kuber is not from India. It's from Xinjiang in what is Uyghur land, because that's where Kuber was most worshipped. Logically, because it's the Silk Road, and all the Hindu traders and big business leaders, the Ambanis and the Adanis, as our secular friends would call them, were all in the Xinjiang region and along the Silk Route.
So that I wanted to go over some of the other artifacts that you have prepared as part of our report. So maybe you can talk about this a little bit. So that you're on mute again.
I think I muted myself again. Because my daughter is talking away in the background, so I was trying to be nice.
I think she's going to take over the show. Just wait for a couple of months.
Yes.
And
She's gonna.
we should set the target of the 100th episode of Hindu Lounge should be done just by Maya Durga.
Yes, and I think we should just register the.
It's not that far away, so that we are already on 73rd. So 27 more weeks, and she'll be ready to take over, and then we'll get our Sunday mornings back to lazy Sundays, and waking up at noon.
Exactly. Yeah, and then we don't have to sit through the night and put together slides.
She's up anyway. She's up till 2 in the morning preparing for this, and she's up at I don't know what time, but she's all ready to go with shower and everything taken, and she's ready to go in the morning. So I mean, might as well just turn over the whole thing to her.
Exactly.
She's enthusiastic. It's a that's called the generational transfer of responsibilities, right?
Exactly. We in VHPA are very good at that.
Exactly.
So I was going to, let's go back to the slides.
Sure.
We have in the first slide we put together, and I think Manikanta, again, I have to thank Manikanta for all the effort of that he has gone through to making these beautiful pictures come together. Is the Ganesha. And so what is very fascinating is that in the Indian subcontinent, especially the woke leftist scholars, they always try to promote this trope. It's this whole narrative against to diminish Hindu dharma and Hindutva. They keep telling that the Ganesha was a tribal deity from southwestern India, that the quote unquote Aryan invaders and their descendants somehow usurped and to bring the local tribals into their communities. Well, nothing is far from truth, because if one of the earliest depictions again of Ganesha comes from what our in the Indian subcontinent the secularist leftist academia calls the land of the Aryans, where all these Aryans came from. That's where Ganesha actually comes from. So again,
Well, actually, it's fascinating. I was doing some research on this last night, or and I found that one of the articles that talks about how the artifacts, the Hindu Buddhist artifacts in Afghanistan are under threat, said that the Brahminical artifacts started appearing in the 7th century in Afghanistan. Started appearing in Afghanistan in the 7th century. So see how loaded this term is. The Brahminical artifacts started appearing in Afghanistan in 7th century.
you
What do
know
you make of that?
you know what is very fascinating? First, let me talk. I think we should do a whole show on the term Brahminical, because if there is a term that is Goebbelsian in its intent and its vileness, the term Brahminical and the way it is nowadays used in mainstream academia across the world, including the top universities of America. If there was ever an example of propaganda, this is the term that can be used as to show that example on how, you repeat a lie 1,000 times that Goebbels said and it becomes the truth. So the original term Brahmanical, as described by Western scholars during colonial times, was the concept of Brahman, or the absolute truth or absolute oneness that exists in Vedic Hindu traditions, especially Vedantic Hindu traditions, whether it is, Advaita, Vishishta Advaita, Advaita, which are the primarily philosophical schools that 99% of the Hindus today follow. The Vedantic traditions, the word that the Western colonial scholars used to describe the Vedantic traditions was Brahmanical, which means the existence and the belief in the absolute one, called Brahman or Parabrahman or Parameshwar, depending on which philosophy you follow. Today's scholars in the last 70 years or 80 years have changed the word Brahman, as in the Sanskrit meaning of the absolute or one God or one supreme being, to this caste Brahmin, and then have started using it to depict a religion that is only meant for one jati. So if there was ever an example of absolute propaganda and lie to really vilify a community, this is an example of that. So from there, you can literally say anything. And for you then, from there onwards, Hindu Dharma literally doesn't exist. Because now you have changed the term Brahman, or the belief in one absolute oneness of soul, to a term that just depicts a jati. And that is what the Marxist historians and the academics and our own people have done to themselves in the global context. So I just wanted to get that off my mind, so that if anybody is listening to this show in future, should stop using the word Brahminical in any context, because it doesn't mean anything. It has nothing to do with the jati Brahmin or caste Brahmin, as the Westerners call it. It is everything to do with the concept of one absolute supreme being called Brahman, or the Parabrahman, or the Parameshwar, depending on which philosophy of Hindu school you follow, Hindu darshan you follow. Okay, having said that, to come to your question about all these things appearing in the 7th century, well, the last Hindu dynasty in Afghanistan was in 7th and 8th century. In fact, the Hindu Shahi dynasties, let me track back one more minute. Another BS that many of these academics and scholars, the leftist academia peddles around the world, is this whole idea that Afghan Hindu dynasties were Indian. They had nothing to do with India. The last Hindu dynasty in Afghanistan was actually by ethnicity Turkic. It was called the Turki Shahi dynasty. And just because, this is something that we Indians have to understand as well. People who come from Indian origin, Hindus who come from Indian origin. Just because the king's name was Trilochan Pal or Jayapal or Bhimdev, very Sanskrit names with Indian connection, you feel like they're Indians. They were actually not Indians. They were Turkic by ethnicity, but they were all staunch practicing Hindus. In fact, the Turki Shahi dynasty, Hindu dynasty of Afghanistan, which controlled most of Afghanistan in the 7th century, between actually 4th, 5th to 7th, 8th century, they fought against the Islamists longer than most Hindu dynasty in central India could fight. So when Mahmud Ghaznavi took over Afghanistan from Ghazni, he comes from Ghazni, as this name suggests. When he took over Afghanistan, his ancestors, his Islamist ancestors and the Arabs and their predecessors, they had fought longer, the Hindu kings of Afghanistan, than he needed to fight the Hindu kings of what is present-day India. That tells us how strong Hindu Dharma was in Afghanistan. In fact, as somebody who has looked into Kashmir's history for a while, it is very fascinating that the Afghan Hindu kings, the Shahis, Hindu Shahis of Afghanistan, used to intermarry the Kashmiri Hindu kings, because they are right across, from each other geographically, and there was no Durand line in those days. So, there was no border between what is Afghanistan today and what is Pakistan today. It was all the same area, and what was later known as the Hindu Kush Mountains. So they were all contiguous to each other. And when Mahmud Ghaznavi actually was finally able to defeat the Hindu kings of Afghanistan, they had escaped south into what is present day Rawalpindi, what is present day northern Punjab in Pakistan, and they ruled from there for another 2 generations. And their daughters married Kashmiri kings and their children. In fact, the Kashmiri general who fought and defeated the Abbasid dynasty was a descendant of Trilochan Pal, who was the Afghan Shahi king. So it is really fascinating if we ever pay attention to that history, and if ever that region returns back to Hindu Dharma, they will be so proud of what their ancestors achieved. Unfortunately, at this point of time, they are the biggest recruiters to Taliban. So that ship is.
Let me take a step back. I mean, you narrated the history of last 2,000 years, but I want to tell you that 5,000 years ago, 5,500 years ago, in Mahabharat, Gandhari was from Gandhar, and Gandhar is a province of Afghanistan to this day with the same name. And Gandhari means someone from Gandhar. So the Hindu history of Afghanistan dates at least 5,500 years. And to say that this is something that started appearing in 7th century makes absolutely no sense, because there is a recorded history of 5,500 years ago that clearly states that Gandhari, came from, wife of Dhritarashtra in Mahabharata, came from Afghanistan. And she did not.
Even if you don't, many of these leftist historians don't want to pay attention to any of our, itihas. They just ignore it completely. Even if you go by Western sources, because they only listen to what, quote unquote, the colonial narrative provides. Even if you go by the colonial narrative, forget the Hindu itihas for a moment. Even if you go by colonial narrative, they have the earliest Hindu entities, Hindu artifacts showing up in Afghanistan. And in our report, we cover that. We cover some of that showing up in Afghanistan from late Bronze Age. So that takes us back to about 6,000 years from now, around the same time that Mahabharata, and actually even before Mahabharata, Mahabharata talks about these Mahajanpads, all these democratic states with nominal rulers, but people governing themselves through democratic means, almost like a republic, modern day republic. So Mahabharata talks about those Mahajanpads, and Gandhar was one of those Mahajanpads. But even before that, even before the existence of those Mahajanpads, we have recorded Hindu artifacts from the Bronze Age era. So, I think that the facade of this dismantled global Hindutva crowd that all these academics produced is slowly falling off, primarily thanks to the research we have done. But, at some point we should have a show giving examples of these things and exposing them. But, that's another time.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this slide.
Okay. So this is, as you can see, this is, there is nothing more Hindu that can be, and this season is the season of Durga Puja and Diwali. So as you can see, there are 2 slides, actually 3 slides, depicting Durga in different forms. You have Durga Mahishasur Mardini, again, the Devi Durga that today is the biggest Hindu festival in what is Bengal, 3,000 miles away from what is Afghanistan. You see Devi Durga depicted in Afghanistan. Again, this is one of the earliest depictions of Mahishasur Mardini Durga that you can see. And in this, on the right side above, you see the face with the third eye. Very, very, you go to Durga Puja pandals around the world, in Durga Puja pandals in Bengal, you will see Devi Durga depicted almost in the exact same way. In fact, when you look at this photograph of Devi Durga's head, you almost feel like it's from a sculptor in Kumartuli in Bengal or Kolkata, as if time has frozen. This is 1400 years ago. that they were doing this in Afghanistan. In the picture below, obviously has been desecrated by some Islamist at some point. You see Mahisasur at the bottom, and the Singh, the lion on which Durga rides. So Mahisasur and the lion, along with some of the hands of Durga, but the upper part of her torso has been beheaded and decapitated. So you don't see the upper part. Somebody has destroyed that.
So that this picture, sorry to interrupt. I want to make one point. This picture of Mahisasur Mardini points to India, Bharat Varsha, being a single geographic entity that went from all the way in Afghanistan to all the way down south to Sri Lanka. And the reason I say that is also that is because what is the place where the Mahisasur Mardan took place? Where was Mahisasur killed?
You tell me.
It's today's in present day Mysore. The Mysore name comes from Mahisasur, and you go there and you see a temple on the hills of Mysore. And so this points to the fact that something that happened all the way down in Karnataka is depicted all the way up in north in Afghanistan. If that is not, that is, look at the span, look at the geographic span. For all the people who want to say that, Bharat today was unified by British or it didn't exist as a single geographic entity and all that, look at the cultural span, the dharmic span that Hindu Dharma extended. And whether it is the marriage of Gandhari during Mahabharat, or even ancient than that, the Mahisasur, the Vadha of Mahisasur or killing of Mahisasur that happened in Karnataka all the way down in Mysore, in present day Mysore, depicted in Afghanistan all the way up north. This shows
Ajay bhai, the problem is,
span.
I understand what you're saying, but the problem with the academics and the scholars is that to them, both the depiction of Gandhari in Mahabharata as well as the story of Mahisasur, Mahisasur being from Mysore, and the entire story of this in the Puranic stories, they don't matter. They don't even take it seriously. To them, these are all folklores. So my point is,
true, but look, 3 days ago there was a news item that the ancient Mount Sinai has finally been discovered. Right? It is the amount of work that goes into the archaeology to prove it. It's not that the beliefs have been constant in Hindu Dharma. It is not something that was invented in the last 10 years.
That is the tragedy, Ajay bhai, because in the Western world, the Judeo-Christians, they have a different way. They will, if you open up National Geographic and Discovery Channel, 30% of their programming ends up promoting or historically analyzing, scientifically analyzing biblical stories in some form or the other. Yep. Whether it is in terms of their history or whatever. They don't hesitate to do that. And they work very hard, put millions and millions of dollars in scientific research to prove biblical stuff. You go to the Indian academics, especially the Marxist ones, who are enamored by the colonial narratives that they claim to dispel. They will dismiss any form of itihas, any form of Hindu history that comes through our traditions as complete bunkum. They will never accept it. In fact, they will come up with any sort of weird theories. If you tell them that Mahisasur Mardini's story is an example of how unified the civilizational Hindu identity is, and its depiction in Afghanistan is a proof of that, they will come back with a story by telling you that all these deities, the style in which they have been made, shows that they were imported by some Indian trader into Kabul 7th century, 12 centuries ago, which is what the article you mentioned. They actually claim that these things are not from Afghanistan. They were taken there by some Adani or Ambani of those days, literally, as their tropes flow around. So this is how demented and their narrative can get, because they are always about the tail wagging the dog. And
talk to me about this slide. What is this slide? What is this about?
No, I just want to go back one step, Ajay bhai, to the
I'm sorry.
Uma Maheshwar You see the Uma Maheshwar from Tepe Skandar. So
Yes.
that is actually a very fascinating thing, because Mahishasur Mardini is one way of depicting Devi Durga, but the fact that Shiva and Uma are so intrinsic to our Puranic tales, so intrinsic, like to see that simple and clear depiction of Uma and Maheshwar Shiva in Afghan history. No, that is fascinating. That shows that it was not just historically aligned with the Hindu heritage, but there was such a diversity of deities and that are core to Hindu dharma. And there will be scholars in the Western academia who try to say, oh, these were all somehow connected to Buddhism, because that's the next thing they do. They try to connect it to the heritage of Buddhism, because nothing outside the geographical entity what is current day India can ever be Hindu in their mindset. I mean, they would grudgingly admit that the city of Rawalpindi was named after some Hindu king, but they don't want to go any further. But this is a very good example of how not only was there a strong presence of Hindu civilizational identity, but there was also the same diversity of Hindu deities, the same diversity of iconography, of Puranic stories that existed across the rest of the Indian subcontinent. And that is a very another good example of how integrated it was to the larger civilizational Hindu mainstream. Okay, we can go to the next one, Ajay.
All right. What is this slide? What does this slide show? What are the panels here?
So this slide is a very good example of if you see the everyday lifestyle of the depiction that people are showing on the right side. If you go to any other part of India, especially Amravati or Sanchi, which is in central India, and you see the depiction of the everyday life of royalty, the everyday life of people going back to the Mauryan age, this is literally, even the design of the facades, this design of the railings, the design of the gateways, the style of clothes, it is literally the same. So this is another very good, and this is not a most likely a religious. This is a life, everyday life being depicted of royalty, because he's riding a horse or she's riding a horse. It's very clear that it's royalty, because in those days horses were so rare and so it hard to take care of, that only people of certain social status could ride horses in those days. So that is another example of how lifestyle was and how unified it was to the other Hindu depictions from the same period. On the left, you see, and again, this is something that is very uncommon in Hindu traditions: worship of deity Surya. It's a very early Vedic tradition. There are
only few sun temples in India. I mean,
exactly,
there are only a couple of them.
There are very few.
Very few. I mean, I shouldn't say a couple of them, but very few.
There is one in Konark, obviously in Odisha. There is a one which is in the easternmost corner of India, what is present day India. There is obviously one in Modera in Gujarat, which is one of the most beautiful sun temple architecture you can ever see. It's an absolutely fascinating temple. And then, of course, there is this depiction of Surya, beautifully depicted. I'm not sure if it has survived. Last known location was the National Museum in Kabul, but we really hope that we can preserve. And I really hope we can actually build a sun temple in America around this deity. And if we could, if nothing else, we want it to be part.
There's an Afghan mandir built by Afghan immigrants in Maryland.
In Maryland,
so
I've been to that place. I've been to. It's
maybe this is something that we can inspire them to actually put a Surya Murti.
If we can recover, I think this would be one of the best. It's a gift to the future generations of Hindus in America, and a gift to the American people if we can preserve and promote it. Bring it to the US.
I think it is something that we should probably work with them to see if there is an opportunity to have them join hands with us in preserving the Afghan Hindu artifacts.
Absolutely. So the above two pictures are basically craft work one depicting a fish. It just I put it there just to show the detailing and the amount of craft, the good work that the handicraft people in those days in Afghanistan. It was such an advanced civilization to see these people today go down to just firing guns and rockets and blowing each other up. It's so sad. I mean, that's one of the, this is as much an effort to preserve and make talk about our Hindu heritage as it is to revive the glorious heritage of the Afghans who today are suffering. And this is the ancestors of the people who are present day Taliban and ISIS. And look what has happened to them, and look what a religious ideology has done to them. So I think, if nothing else, the preservation of this is going to be a gift to the people of Afghanistan for generations to come, as much as it is the gift to our children.
So, is this the depiction of fish? Was it related to Matsya Avatar?
No, actually, I could not confirm any source that is related to this, but I put it there because I wanted to show the detailing and this is something that has survived 1500 years. I mean, think of an artifact in Europe that has survived 1500 years at this scale. Very, very few. So for a society, imagine the amount of stuff that was there already in Afghanistan that has seen so much of destruction, that has seen so much of ravaging, and to still have some of these gems, invaluable gems of history still survive, that comes from our heritage. That's why I just put it there, because it's just so fascinating and well done.
It absolutely is.
And I just wanted to make one more point, that this is just a glimpse of some of the things we put up in the last 1 day, 2 days. We have a whole Twitter thread going on our Hindu Pact Twitter account. I will have even more such artifacts being posted every day for the next couple of days, as this is Hindu Heritage Month. Please share it. Please make it popular. Let people know what the civilizational heritage of Hindu heritage of Afghanistan was. So I just follow us on Twitter, see our latest tweets and threads on this topic. Sorry.
And here is the Twitter. Please follow us at Hindu Pact, at Hindu Pact on Twitter. Usada, any final comments before we move on to our regularly scheduled segments?
No, I think my final comment would be, support us. If you know anybody at the State Department, if you know anybody at the White House, please bring this to their notice. We are reaching out to them officially as well over the next couple of days. And please help us document this, talk about this, and eventually save this for our future generations.
Utsada, I want to go to the next topic, and I just call it news of the week. It's not a good news, bad news. It's just news of the week. It shows both the effect of what kind of world we live in with Hindu phobia around us, and the effect of Hindus coming together. So Utsada, let me share this screen with you now, and see what you have to comment on this. This, Utsada, is a news item from Papua New Guinea, and I'm just bringing it up. So, Papua New Guinea, which is a Christian country, denied the permission. Now, Papua New Guinea, actually, interestingly enough, if you read the Wikipedia on Papua New Guinea, it will say that it's a very tolerant country. It embraces all cultures and all of that. And they banned Durga Puja because it was idol worshiping and against the Christian ethos. There was a massive outpouring, massive protest around the world. Be it Hindu Pact took this as well, and I know that Utsada from Hindu Pact account you tweeted and you sent a letter that was sent to the ambassador of Papua New Guinea, inviting him to the Durga Puja. All of these things had an effect on Papua New Guinea. They apologized and they said it was an error. They never meant to ban the Durga Puja, and now the Durga Puja is on. So the quote from one of their officials is that once again I humbly seek your forgiveness for this unfortunate error, and I hope that you accept that this was not in any way deliberate. I will make myself available if you wish to personally discuss the matter with me. And that is the quote from one of their officials. So, the comments?
Well,
So that you're on mute again.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
no,
go
yeah,
ahead.
I unmuted myself. I would say that old habits die hard. Uh, I genuinely believe that the person who made the response about Hindu dharma being not being monotheistic, and him being quote unquote Christian, therefore he cannot allow anything that is not monotheistic to be celebrated, was an instinctive behavior. It comes from generations of conditioning and intolerance, and that's very intrinsic to the theological inspirations that the person came from, and that was his instinctive response. But hopefully, as they saw the outrage, as they saw uh, the awareness that was generated globally, they came to their senses and made a more condition and then made a more thoughtful response, which is to apologize. And the reason Hindu Pact invited them, because Hindu Pact is present in Washington, D.C. There is an embassy of Papua New Guinea in Washington, D.C. They don't have a Twitter account, so it was hard to reach them. And therefore, I reached out to the tourism department of Papua New Guinea, because hopefully somebody is monitoring their Twitter account, Papua New Guinea being such a beautiful tourist spot, beautiful island and ironically, the people of Papua New Guinea were not Christians, a couple of generations ago. So it's really sad and ironic that they became so fundamentalist, and they were actually enforced into Christianity by the colonizers. And so I reached out to them and say, just come in. There are so many Hindu temples around the Washington D.C. National Capital Region, multiple traditions of Durga Puja being celebrated, different temples, speaking different languages, bringing different cultures, some not even Indian, some from Bangladesh, some from Nepal. They can come to many of these temples and enjoy the diversity and the vibrancy of our Hindu traditions. So I just thought it was good for everybody if they did that.
So that it is. I do want to say that, yes, they made an error, and we accept their apology, and I think that this has been an educational experience for them, and they will not repeat this again. With that, Utsoda, let me go to the next segment of our show, and the next segment of our show, as always, is the Hindu Seva Charity Act of the Week. And Utsoda, we always have the this go on with our intro music to this, right? So here is the one. So the Hindu Seva Charity Act of the Week this week is to help Hindu Pact legislative efforts to save the Afghan Hindu artifacts. Once again, the Hindu Seva Charity Act of the Week: donate to VHPA for the Hindu Heritage Month activity. This Hindu Heritage Month activity for this week is preservation of Afghan Hindu artifacts. Go to hindupact.org/donate and donate to Hindu Pact efforts to legislatively and diplomatically save the Afghan Hindu artifacts. Any comments before we move to the next segment?
Well, my only comment is that support us. Everything we do, we put immense amount of effort, immense amount of time. We need we need resources to make it work. Donate to us. It is 501c3, tax exempted. Everything you do helps us give a voice to the Hindu communities, not just in America, but also around the world, as you can see in this case, the heritage of Afghanistan. So I thank you beforehand for all the support you give us.
So that the next segment, and we always have a little bit of a drum roll for that. So let's do the drum roll. I know how much you enjoy the drum rolls. So here we go. So that just this is just for you, just because you love the drum rolls. And so that the next the Hindu good news of the week, our next segment, and so that the Hindu good news of the week is, why would even it qualify for good news, Utsada? It is a mandir, and because of political reasons, this is a mandir in Karnataka. It's called the Datta Peeth Shrine, and this is the mandir because of some political manipulations and other things. Historically, did not have a Hindu priest; it had a Muslim priest, and so that finally the Karnataka High Court ordered that a Hindu priest should be appointed in a Hindu shrine, in a Hindu mandir, to perform the puja. How ironic a Hindu news can it be?
It can happen only in India. Only in India. The level of delusional self deprecation and quote unquote secularism, it's just something that can happen only in India. And there is a reason why India was probably colonized for so many centuries. And there is a reason why the remnants of that continue to still linger on. And this is a good example of that. Only in India.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable that a Hindu shrine, a Hindu mandir, has a non Hindu priest, and you have to go to court and win a battle in court in order to have a Hindu priest. Unbelievable. But
But Ajay bhai, the fact is that, think about it, like any other civilization would have folded and gone by now. Like we would have been the Christian dude from Papua New Guinea by now. So
well, so that there's an argument to be made that Afghanistan has this integral part of India, integral part of Hindu civilization has become that. So
that
if you
is true.
really look at the map of the Hindu civilization, it is a shrinking map. If
That is
population
true.
density is higher,
That is true.
population density is higher, but it is a shrinking map.
So if you look at nearly 40% of the Muslim population in the world today has heritage and ancestry in Hindus. Nearly 40%. And this is, I'm being very generous here. If you just add up the Muslim population of Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Afghanistan.
Turkey
I'm
at
not
one
even going
point.
there. I'm not even going there. I'm just
Okay.
going by what is recorded Hindu history. I'm not going Proto-Vedic. I'm not going Avestan. I'm not going Syria, Turkey, and their Hindu history. That's, somebody can argue against that on terms of geographical identity. I'm just talking about Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, India, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Well recorded Hindu history. If you just add up the Muslim population of this country, that's nearly 40% of the world's Muslim population. All
Yes.
Hindu heritage. So you are right. Hindus have lost tremendously. It's just that they need that consciousness to exist to understand this.
And so then we finally come to our last segment, the Hindu phobe of the week. And so that we always give you uh, you know some kind of a music, introductory music for that. So here we go.
So Ajay bhai, you have to share the screen because the
It will come after the music. So that this is just a way to get you excited about who is going to be the Hindu phobe of the week. And Utsada, the Hindu phobe of the week this week it's a surprise to you because I know that you have not seen this either. So I'm going to share it with you. This is a cleric in Pakistan who visited a Hindu shrine. So that this is a very well-known cleric in Pakistan. His name, and let me make this a little bigger so everyone can read this properly. Uh, his name is Mufti Tariq Masood. Take a look at this picture.
You have to switch
of
on the screen. You have to. We cannot see anything.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There we go. Just a second. So the Mufti Tariq Masood, he is a Pakistani cleric, and he went to the Kali Mata Mandir to mock Hindus. Now remember how intimidated the Hindus are in Pakistan. Look at our Chingari project. Hindu girls are getting abducted, uh, and sometimes they're getting abducted from their homes or from the streets, and they live under constant threat. Now, in that environment, this cleric, who has a vast following, goes to Kali Mata Mandir to actually mock the Hindus. Okay,
So,
this is the guy who has is not an unknown cleric. He has 2.5 million followers.
2.5 million followers, correct? And so the couple of things that he did, and this is something that all our all the wokes around the
Yeah,
world.
where is Hindus for human rights on this?
Yeah, Hindus,
Instead of
all those enlightened,
intimidating Hindu minority in Sindh,
all the
so that I'm getting
enlightened people around
feedback
the
echo
world,
from your side.
Black Lives Matter should listen to this guy. This guy goes to this temple in Pakistan, Hindu temple, where there is a Hindu from Pakistan who is a native of that land for, again, since the Bronze Age. He goes
Yes,
and tells this guy that, I wonder why you are so light skinned, because most Hindus are really black.
yes,
This
I
is
was
what.
just coming to that.
And Mufti Tariq Masood, if he looks back into his own ancestors just 5 generations ago, they were Hindu.
Maybe not even five, right?
Maybe not
Maybe
even
not even
five.
five.
I'm just giving a safe number because most of these people were converted within the last 10 generations. So his own ancestors were Hindu. And then this guy goes and tells a Hindu who is an indigenous native of Pakistan for 7,000 years, asks him why you are so white skinned, light skinned, because Hindus are supposed to be black. And this
Here you
what
go.
a word.
Masood and his group now enter the temple. Masood greets the temple pujari and tells him that he looks like a Pathan as he is Gota Chitta or light complex. The Hindus I have seen in my life were blacks. It doesn't matter what skin color you are, but
Correct.
to
No,
make a
but that
racist
shows the level of
statement, make a racist statement like that.
no. That shows three things. He first denies his own Hindu ancestry. He denies that Hindus were ever present on that land, which is ironic because that entire land was Hindu for 80% of its known history. He considers he's racist and considers Hindus to be black. That's the third point. And more importantly, he has so much disdain for Hindus that he literally cannot accept the fact that there could be a native running as a priest of a temple in Pakistan. So,
Yeah.
so there are 4 levels of absolutely disgusting hatred that this gentleman is exhibiting.
And he's actually representative of that country. I mean,
And
he
and,
really
and
is.
this is the sad part, Ajay bhai. You have a neighborhood squabble in some part of India where by internal scuffle, a Hindu kid if a Hindu kid slaps a Muslim kid, it's news in Washington Post and New York Times with this entire woke generation of Indians and non-Indians coming at your throat if it ever happens in India. Just to a fight in the neighborhood between two kids in which a Muslim kid gets slapped. Not a single word of protest from mainstream media in America, not a single word of protest from the dismantled global Hindutva crowd. No mention. Because, and I'll tell you why. Because the same people who fund those projects, who support those projects, who promote those articles are the people who are friends of the Mufti here. And that's why this
And
doesn't
look at what he does. He says he asked the pujari, "Where is a Mata in Kali Mata temple? Who is Mata? Is this cow?" And he mocks the pujari even as pujari is trying to explain. Okay, then look at this. I'm pointing these things out uh, because people around the world should know that this kind of hatred against Hindus exists. He asked the pujari to look in the camera and give a message to Hindus of India. And a task that Pujari, he's asking, but what message? It's almost as if he is holding a gun on the head of this pujari and saying, now give a message to people in India. He is referring to murtis as butts, and he's saying,
So both.
you know,
Ajay bhai, this is a term that is very historically relevant. So the use of the word Buddh, it's actually not butts, it's called Buddh. And it comes from it's a distortion of the word Buddha, Buddh. And this is how much hatred is at the core of Islamism. And people can come and challenge me on this conversation, and I can go on any platform to discuss this. And if the works of the crazy nutcases of the Hindus for human rights people are listening to me and want to bring me on a platform to discuss this, I'll be happy to do that. The history of the word Buddh and what it means to the Islamist. It's a word of hatred against anything that has a human form, any deity. And they started off, they give this honorary term to those people in Islam who destroy deities, and they're called Buddhikan. So it's an honorific term. It's like sir in English courts, in how the British royalty, you get the term sir, or that's how the word Buddhikan means. So somebody who destroys deities in the Islamic world. And there are very famous quote unquote Buddhikans who destroyed Hindu temples in Kashmir, who destroyed Hindu temples in what is present day Pakistan and Afghanistan. So the word Buddh has a lot of loaded meaning to it. I just wanted to point that out.
Sorry, I related to the English word, which I don't know if the Mufti also played a double
No, no,
word
no, no.
game there.
He probably doesn't know what it means in English. He meant the word Buddh, because to him, that's of significant historical. He wants to be like those great Buddhikans. That is his goal in life. That gives him salvation in his own little worldview.
Yeah. So that with that, as sad as it is, and we do have a sad music here. So let me. This is for the Hindu phobe or Hindu hater of the week. So that with that, we come to the end of today's program. This is Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge is brought to you by Hindu Pact. Hindu Pact is the policy research and advocacy initiative of World Hindu Council of America, or VHPA. I am Ajay Shah. I'm the president of World Hindu Council of America, and with me, as always, Utsav Chakrabarti. Utsav is the executive director of Hindu Pact, and he is, as always, the intellectual driving force behind this show and a lot of the initiatives we do as part of BHPA. So, Utsada, thank you. And to our viewers, thank you. We come live every Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern. Please join us next week as we pick another interesting contemporary American Hindu issue. Thank you, Utsada. See you
Thank
again
you,
next week.
Ajay, and
And
thanks for the.
please stay tuned. We have a really, really wonderful tune created just for us by Decibels. And I cannot thank Decibels enough. I do this every week and I still cannot say thank you enough. They create a special tune just for this show, this episode, every single week. And it's this week's tune is just out of the world. So please stay tuned. We are going to play the special music that was created by Decibel for this episode of Hindu Lounge. Thank you and namaste. Please stay tuned for the special Decibel music. And we go there in just a second. And here we go.